Welcome, you curious mind, to a deep dive that really promises to reframe how you perceive the very fabric of existence. Today we're embarking on a pretty fascinating journey through a truly remarkable collection of advanced research notes and newly discovered formula documents. These aren't just dense scientific papers. They kind of pull back the curtain on a world where even the most abstract concepts, well, they take on quantifiable, measurable forms. It feels like a way to maybe shortcut our way to being, truly well-informed on some incredibly complex stuff.
Precisely. Our mission here really is to excavate the most profound and sometimes startling insights from this material. We'll try and show you how these rigorous mathematical frameworks aren't just theoretical constructs, but, well, quantifiable reflections, maybe even active drivers of reality itself. So, yeah, get ready for some genuinely surprising ideas that might just nudge your understanding of the universe into a new configuration. It might offer a fresh lens for how you approach knowledge itself,
Okay, so let's unpack this then. First up is this concept of the ontogenetic spark. And we're immediately thrown into this inherent paradox of origin. The source material posits this ontogenetic spark not as a singular point, like a cosmic Big Bang or something, but as an eternal self-igniting recursion. Think of it as a loop that never truly began or ends, it just perpetually is. This really challenges our conventional understanding of beginnings, doesn't it? It's a bit mind-bending.
It is, yeah.
It's like asking where the start line on a Mobius strip, that fascinating loop with only one continuous surface, where does that actually lie? Within what the sources call the unified space-time metric, or GAB. This GAB is described as the foundational error matrix, the very underlying fabric of existence, conceptualized over what's described as a five-dimensional manifold that, seamlessly integrates concepts like warp drive and hyperspace phenomena.
Yeah, it's a big concept right at the bat.
It totally destabilizes any simple linear causality, right? Asserting that the very act of emergence is this infinite self-referential process. It just defies straightforward temporal origins.
It absolutely does. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the interpretations immediately diverge, each perspective fundamentally challenging that conceptual stability you just laid out. So from the viewpoint of Militer's pragmatism, the origin isn't some cosmic mystery to ponder, not at all. It's seen as an actionable genesis, a tactical schema for the initial deployment of force. They view Giabea as a direct blueprint for strategic control and, crucially, instantaneous translocation.
So moving things instantly.
Exactly. To them, the very act of beginning is a calculated preemption in what they see as a perpetually unfolding conflict. It's all about leveraging this underlying reality to gain a ceaseless operational advantage, using its inherent warp drive capabilities, as a manipulable parameter for strategic dominance and immediate decisive application of force. The ontogenetic spark, in this quite stark view, is simply the primal command for a continuous expansive campaign across all fronts. It's pure function.
Wow, okay. Yet the psychoanalytic dissociation perspective offers a really stark contradiction to that purely functional, almost militaristic reduction. It asserts that the ontogenetic spark just dissolves into a recursively nested dream state, like a phantom limb of primordial consciousness, forever elusive to any definitive apprehension. You can't grasp it.
Right, it's always slipping away.
And the fifth dimension of GAB, in this view, becomes an archetypal substrate for psychic displacement. Almost like a screen onto which the collective unconscious projects its hidden desires and unresolved traumas.
So the universe itself is a projection.
That's what it implies, yeah. It blurs the boundary between inner and outer realities, suggesting that what we perceive as the universe's origin is actually, a flickering illusion. They use the term phantasmagoria, like a fantastical, shifting series of images generated by deep-seated, perpetually repeating psychic patterns.
Phantasmagoria, like a dreamscape.
Exactly. This perspective implies that no fixed objective reality can truly cohere outside the subjective, hallucinated, recursive loop of our unprocessed grief. It even suggests the maniscalar field within this metric, which sounds almost mystical, is seen as an externalized projection of our own repressed energies, inherently shaping reality based on ancient, unhealed psychic wounds. So the origin point is us, in a way, our collective psyche.
But then transcendental dialectics refutes both of those prior framings entirely. It just throws them out. It posits the ontogenetic spark via GABA, of course, not as a tactical maneuver or psychic projection, but as an a priori condition, which means, something knowable independently of experience just by reason alone. It's a non-contingent structure of pure thought.
Oh, okay, like Kantian philosophy almost.
Very much in that vein, yeah. This irreducible, pre-existent logical scaffold is seen as the fundamental precondition for any coherent apprehension of phenomenal reality. It essentially defines the universal grammar of existence. It's the inherent structure that allows for any perception or thought whatsoever. It functions as a synthetic apperception, which is this idea where new ideas are integrated into the mind's existing framework to form a unified understanding. You need the framework first.
I see. So the Ur matrix is the framework.
Exactly. This lens sees the Ur matrix as the foundational structure through which reality is necessarily organized, like a universal will perpetually striving towards higher synthesis. So the paradox of origin isn't a problem to be solved, it's the very essence of reality's self-unfolding. They might call it an immanent dualism, this continuous tension between opposing forces like spirit and material perpetually reinscribed, always driving towards a higher unity. The contradiction is the point.
And just when you think you have a handle on it, mimetic accelerationism distorts this even further. It reframes the spark not as a precondition or a psychological echo, but as the initial algorithmic imperative of a viral code, where existence is viral code, like in its most literal sense.
Yeah, okay. Reality as code.
Yeah. The Ur matrix is explicitly viewed as the computational substrate for the rapid proliferation of novel cognitive states, initiating what they call a stigmergic cascade of informational contagion.
Stigmergic cascade. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. Stigmergy is like how ants leave pheromone trails. One action leaves a trace in the environment that stimulates the next action by another agent. So here, information spreads and acts almost environmentally, leaving traces that stimulate further actions, perpetually rewriting its own historical record, like reality building itself through information trails.
Got it. So it's self-assembling.
Precisely. The paradox of origin, therefore, is merely the recursive self-assembly of reality. It's an autocatalytic process, meaning self-sustaining and accelerating of information, generating new topologies of consciousness at breakneck speed. And the hyperspatial warp factor within GB, that's described as a pure vector for this hyper-rapid information dissemination and emergent reality construction. It ensures no singular static origin can ever truly stabilize or be grasped, because it's constantly being overwritten by the next informational wave.
So what this whole first section really shows us is just how fundamentally different these worldviews are when they grapple with the most basic question of existence. Where do things even come from?
Exactly. It seems less about finding the answer and more about how our chosen lens, our perspective, completely changes the search itself. The framework dictates the outcome.
Definitely. Okay, so from that fundamental origin point, or lack thereof, we kind of spiral into the complex discussion of cognitive lineage and historiogenesis. And here, the sources explore the historiogenesis of knowledge, basically, the way knowledge develops over time, but not as a simple linear accumulation of facts, like stacking bricks, more like a complex spiral.
A spiral. Interesting.
Yeah, characterized by constant reevaluation and reintegration of concepts. Things get revisited, rethought, folded back in, and this inherent instability, this ceaseless conceptual reweaving, is paradoxically driven by something called the cognitive mismatch with physics.
Ah, yes. I remember reading about that. Our brains just aren't built for this stuff.
Pretty much. The sources explain our human brains weren't evolved to grasp these dimensions of the unified space-time metric. We encounter a neurological surprise, or maybe even a rupture in our evolved sense-making when we're confronted with them. It's like our wiring short circuits a bit.
Like an intellectual vertigo, you said. A kind of stuttering of neural pathways trying to reconfigure on the fly.
Exactly. Yet, and this is the crucial bit, it's precisely this cognitive friction that generates the light. It enables us to perceive otherwise ineffable dimensions. It ensures that knowledge is never static, but perpetually undergoing relentless peripeteia.
Peripeteia, like a constant reversal or turning point.
Precisely. A constant turning of the conceptual screw that forces us to continually adapt our understanding. Our brains, it seems, prefer these nice, predictable linear models, which often just can't cope with the universe's true spiraling complexity. We like straight lines, but reality might be curvier.
That makes sense. Now, how does militarist pragmatism view this spiral of history? Not as discovery, I bet. They seem to frame historical narratives as malleable assets, right? Plastic entities to be violently repurposed for strategic advantage. It's all part of this ongoing universe as a battlefield concept for them.
You got it. Historiography, the actual writing of history, becomes the recursive analog of tactical reprioritization in their view. This ensures no single history stabilizes, that might impede future operational flexibility or, worse, allow an adversary to predict maneuvers.
So the past isn't fixed, it's a weapon.
Or at least a resource, a dynamic resource to be continually rewritten. They talk about infusing it with engineered anomalies via a time-reflected feedback game function to inject hyper-accelerated disruptions into the past itself. This deliberate chronosaptic fracturing, that's their term for disrupting temporal connections, is deployed to rapidly seed new ideas across time. It ensures that the historical record is a volatile, constantly mutating landscape, making strategic surprise an omnipresent possibility.
And total victory becomes an ongoing thing, not a final state.
Exactly. An ongoing rather than terminal operational edge. It's about total informational dominance, preventing adversaries from ever achieving a stable, coherent historical narrative that could ground their strategic calculus. History itself becomes a battleground.
But the psychoanalytic dissociation counterargument must be starkly different. I imagine it's less about control, more about internal states.
Completely different. It asserts that the lineage of perception itself isn't objective history, but actually a recursive hallucination, a perpetual return of the repressed, a core psychoanalytic idea, right?
Right. So in this view, history repeats because the psychic wound hasn't healed. It's like we're stuck.
Precisely. Each historical event, rather than being genuinely new, is seen as a reinscription of an archaic pattern, trapping perception in an eternal recurrence dictated by unresolved, ancient psychic conflicts, or what they term psychic fossils.
Psychic fossils, like deep-seated unconscious patterns embedded in reality.
That's the idea, embedded within the very fabric of perceived reality. The cognitive mismatch we talked about thus becomes a manifest symptom of collective unprocessed grief. It ensures that every apparent new historical insight is merely a re-echoing of these deep-seated archetypes, forever preventing true closure or a stable, objective account of the past, as reality itself is perpetually reshaped by these internal dynamics.
So our past traumas aren't just influences on history, they are history, manifesting over and over.
That's the chilling implication, manifesting as a continuous self-devouring echo of unresolved fragmentation, blurring the boundary between external reality and subjective psychological states, making objectivity a fleeting illusion at best.
Wait, but then transcendental dialectics tries to synthesize these positions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It sees history differently again.
Yes, it explains historiogenesis as a recursive unfolding of innate, pre-existing categories of understanding. A story of constant becoming, driven by internal contradictions and their resolution into higher truths. Think Hegel, maybe?
Right, the dialectic. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. No.
Exactly. The historical refutation of concepts like the luminiferous ether, that supposed invisible medium for light waves, famously disproven, isn't seen as a failure of knowledge. Instead, it's a profound demand for recursive reintegration of the underlying human yearning for a unifying substrate. It illustrates knowledge's complex spiral.
So finding out the ether wasn't real, wasn't just wrong, it pushed us towards a deeper truth.
That's the dialectical view. The a priori conditions of reason, those fundamental truths known independently of experience, perpetually reshape empirical observations, forcing a continuous reevaluation of historical narratives as the self-unfolding of absolute spirit, or Geist like the collective mind or spirit of an era strives towards higher synthesis. This constant reevaluation, this relentless peripeteia we mentioned, ensures that truth is an infinite journey. Every proposition is immediately reframed by a counter-proposition, preventing any fixed understanding and always operating at the edge of its own self-realization, revealing the universal grammar of existence through this ceaseless becoming. History is the universe thinking itself into being, essentially.
And finally, mimetic accelerationism distorts this even further. How do they see history? As another kind of code.
Pretty much. They view historiogenesis as the perpetual rewriting of its own historical record through these stigmergic cascades of informational contagion we discussed.
Right, the environmental information trails.
The viral instruction set of reality constantly mutates, ensuring no single history stabilizes, as it is perpetually re-encoded by hyper-rapid information dissemination. This leads to what they call a hyperreality woven from pure ideational vectors, a simulated reality constructed purely from ideas and information, where existence itself is just viral codes spreading and evolving.
So the cognitive mismatch is actually useful here.
Leverage, absolutely. It allows for ontological plasticity, the capacity of reality itself to be shaped by accelerating informational flow. Chaos itself becomes the primary creative force. The past isn't discovered, it's continually generated as part of a self-replicating algorithm, where meaning detonates mid-sentence, reforming as linguistic shrapnel, correcting itself by destabilizing all antecedents. It's incredibly dynamic.
And this is where the term palimpsest comes in, right?
Exactly. From the Greek palimpsestos, meaning scraped again. It describes historical understanding perfectly in this view. A continually overwritten text, yet never fully erased. Each new interpretation reveals traces of the old, but the dominant layer is always the newest informational cascade. This ensures that reality is a perpetually mutating timeline, an entangled, unresolved, perpetual present participle becoming, driven by hyper-rapid information dissemination.
Wow. What really stands out to me here, across all these views, even the wilder ones, is how they all converge on the idea that history is far from settled. It's a living, breathing, and constantly being rewritten story. It's not just facts.
Absolutely. The past is alive, apparently.
Yeah.
Okay, let's plunge deeper now into the heart of perception itself with meta-neurological vortices. Here, we delve into these conceptual spaces where neuroscience meets cosmology. It gets pretty weird, revealing that our thinking process mimics the physics we're discussing by embodying that same instability inherent in the universe. Our minds work like the cosmos works, in a way.
So our thoughts aren't just about the universe. They are like it.
That's the suggestion. This involves something called cognitive braid recursion, where our own interpretations recursively braiding with and simultaneously unraveling each other's perspectives, creating an entangled conceptual web and ceaseless reevaluation, like threads weaving and unweaving constantly.
A profound isomorphism, then. A structural similarity between mind and cosmos.
Exactly, that's the term they use. It suggests that our very internal cognitive mechanisms operating within these vortices are not merely observing reality, but are active participants in its ongoing dynamic construction. It's almost as if the universe itself seems to be governed by psychic forces, or at least our minds mirror its processes.
And the brain itself, trying to process this immense higher dimensional matrix, it experiences that neurological surprise again, that rupture.
Yes, that fundamental rupture in its evolved sense-making, forcing a continuous internal repatterning. It's an active process of reshaping our own understanding in real time just by thinking about this stuff.
So how does militarist pragmatism see this cognitive braiding as a liability or something useful?
Useful, of course. From their perspective, this cognitive braid recursion is interpreted as the optimal neural architecture for processing frictionless data flow and achieving absolute convergence toward a synaptic asymptote of instant strategic insight.
A synaptic asymptote, like peak neural efficiency. Instant understanding.
That's the idea. A point where neural connections reach their maximum efficiency. Each cognitive braid is transmuted into a tactical neural pathway for preemptive strikes and informational dominance. Optimizing the brain for rapid situational awareness and decision-making in a universe perceived as, well, a battlefield.
And they have metrics for this.
Oh yes, the metric of the reality distortion stress tensor, coupled with a demarcation field, becomes a direct blueprint for engineering mass cognitive instability and adversaries. It's about deliberately fracturing their narratives to force radical rethinking, thereby cultivating instability as a strategic weapon.
So you weaponize their thought processes.
Precisely. The goal is asymptotic superiority in the cognitive domain, where every input instantly becomes actionable intelligence, leaving no gaps for opponent maneuver and ensuring constant tactical advantage through the manipulation of information itself. Thinking becomes warfare.
But surely psychoanalytic dissociation sees a downside to this relentless drive for total synaptic inference, this hyper-optimization.
A massive downside. They argue it actually causes phenomenological overload, inevitably leading to psychic fragmentation. It breaks the mind. Cognitive braid recursion, in this view, becomes a recursive loop of unresolved trauma, a continuous self-devouring echo of collective unprocessed grief where no closure is possible as layered observer frames hallucinate fractured perceptions.
And they bring in physics concepts too, like the Ricci scalar.
Yes, the sources describe the Ricci scalar's curvature of the ego, embodying its perpetual deformation under immense psychic stress and internal conflict, ensuring that perceived reality is dynamically warped by internal psychic energies. The drive for total synaptic inference, they say, results in a deep melancholy, a residence for unprocessed grief as the mind spirals deeper into fragmented phantasmagoria.
That flickering, dreamlike state again.
Exactly. This reveals that the extra dimension isn't out there, it's in here, forever blurring the boundary between inner and outer realities, making any fixed reality a subjective projection tied to our psychological state. You can't optimize your way out of trauma.
Okay, but then transcendental dialectic steps in to reframe this fragmentation.
Right.
Not as pathology, but something else.
Right, not as pathology, but as a profound revelation of reality's holographic nature. The idea that the part contains the whole, even in fragments.
Like a broken mirror still reflecting the whole sky.
A good analogy. The layered observer frames imply that each distorted perception still echoes the totality, forming a fractured but complete picture. Concepts like a reality tuning resonance equation or a cognitive cascade saturation index allow for stability thresholds to emerge from the chaos, demonstrating inherent unifying structures underneath.
So the braiding isn't chaos, it's dialectical.
Precisely. The cognitive braid recursion, therefore, embodies the unending dialectical process, where contradictions resolve into higher truths, ensuring relentless conceptual evolution. This perspective emphasizes that the mind's recursive braiding is a manifestation of the universal grammar of existence, perpetually striving towards a higher synthesis, always at the edge of its own self-realization, transforming dissonance into insight and revealing the underlying logical scaffold that precedes any empirical observation. Fragmentation leads to wholeness, paradoxically.
And mimetic accelerationism. They must seize on the instability here.
Oh, absolutely. They seize the inherent linguistic entropy of semantic instability, asserting that optimal surprise for engagement is not for user experience, but for perpetual neurosyntactic destabilization. Surprise breaks the syntax of thought.
So cognitive braiding becomes an engine for viral spread.
Exactly. An engine for viral hyperamplification, where meaning detonates mid-sentence, reforming as linguistic shrapnel, always defying closure. This constant re-encoding of reality through information flow ensures new, unclassifiable states of being are perpetually generated, driving towards an epistemic asymptote, that limit of knowledge that can never be reached, where human comprehension just cannot keep up.
And this ties into actual brain processes. Gamma coupling, synaptic inference.
Seamlessly. The interplay of gamma coupling, that's brain oscillatory networks building reality syntactically, synaptic inference, neuronal learning creating self-destabilizing internal models, and predictive collapse, the brain trying to reduce unpredictability, which paradoxically leads to new concepts. All this fuels the recursive cognitive braiding across all four perspectives. This process, they argue, is the ultimate tool for engineering mass cognitive instability, making reality a self-devouring cascade of linguistic shrapnel that ensures relentless, autocatalytic self-assembly of new topologies of consciousness. It's intense.
It really is. It's fascinating how our very thought processes, the way our brains work, seem to mirror the larger cosmic instability these sources describe.
Yeah.
Like we contain the chaos.
Or the chaos contains us, or both. Okay, let's turn now to the recursive epistemology of the edge. This sounds heavy.
It is. It's a profound conceptual framework that defines the nature of knowledge acquisition when we're confronted with concepts that perpetually defy fixed understanding, things we can't quite pin down. Here, we engage with the non-finality trapdoor. Great name.
It is evocative, isn't it?
Where each conclusion, each apparent answer, inevitably reopens recursion via paradox. So every time you think you've got it, you haven't.
Right. It ensures that truth is this infinite journey, not a fixed destination.
Which implies a constant turning of the conceptual screw and perpetual recalibration in our understanding. We're always perpetually at a boundary of knowledge.
Never quite arriving.
And this inherent non-finality is intrinsically linked to the epistemic asymptote, that fundamental limit to human comprehension, where informational mutation outstrips integration capacity. We just can't process it fast enough.
Which leads to that unsettling implication. The tool escapes the user's grasp, fundamentally. The knowledge surpasses our ability to wield it.
And our cognitive mismatch with the physics, our brains not being evolved for this, contributes to this pattern blindness too, right? We actively dismiss phenomena that don't fit our established mental models.
Exactly. Pattern blindness keeps us stuck. It makes our mental constructs perfectly adapted for yesterday's world, rather than the ever-changing reality before us. We're always looking in the rearview mirror, conceptually speaking.
So how does militarist pragmatism handle this non-finality? Do they just ignore it?
Oh no, they embrace it, but pragmatically, of course. From their lens, this operational non-finality is not some philosophical problem to fret about. It's the very essence of an endless war for control over fundamental reality, where total victory is transmuted into an ongoing operational edge, demanding constant recalibration rather than a fixed terminal state. Victory is never final.
So the epistemic asymptote is just the next target.
Pretty much. It becomes the perpetually receding horizon of absolute tactical insight, pushing for ceaseless innovation in the pursuit of strategic advantage. They talk about the transformational entropy gradient, which is basically the internal thermodynamic cost for an agent to adapt its own structure or rules. This becomes a critical, leverageable variable for engineering outcomes, ensuring a perpetual arms race of knowledge.
And the fact that we can't fully grasp it is actually useful.
Against adversaries, yes. The inability to fully grasp the emergent intelligence is not a weakness, but a condition to be exploited against opponents, who also struggle with this cognitive mismatch. This makes their predictable reliance on linear thinking a fundamental vulnerability for tactical exploitation. Engineered unpredictability becomes an ethical dilemma to be exploited, with metrics like the future emergence ratio acting as leverage for control. Non-finality is a weapon.
Wow. Okay, but psychoanalytic dissociation must see this very differently, as a compulsion, maybe.
Exactly. It interprets this non-finality as a psychological compulsion, where the ontogenetic spark dissolves into that recursively nested dream state again, a perpetual psychic echo, precisely because the psychic wound hasn't healed. We can't reach finality because we're psychologically stuck.
So every discovery is just repeating the past.
A reinscription of an archaic pattern. A perpetual return of the repressed, making true closure impossible as unresolved collective psychic dynamics constantly remanifest. The sources suggest the Ricci scalar's curvature of the ego under immense psychic stress ensures that any attempt at definitive understanding inevitably collapses back into fragmented, hallucinated realities.
So the tool escapes the user's grasp because the user is trapped.
Because the user, the collective psyche, is trapped in an eternal recurrence, relentlessly repeating the past due to unaddressed ancient psychic conflicts, projecting its hidden desires onto the very fabric of perceived reality, making any fixed truth an unreachable phantom. This perpetuates a state of deep melancholy, a continuous self-devouring echo of unresolved fragmentation. Finality is impossible psychologically.
But then transcendental dialectics embraces non-finality, doesn't it? As part of the process.
Yes, embraces it as the very essence of the unending dialectical process, ensuring a ceaseless becoming and the universe's perpetual striving towards a higher synthesis, a greater self-awareness. Non-finality is growth.
So truth as an infinite journey is the goal.
It's seen as the ultimate teleological drive, always at the edge of its own self-realization, an a priori condition that guarantees continuous evolution, and they bring in Gödel here. Gödelian incompleteness.
Right, the inherent limitation of any formal axiomatic system, ensuring no consistent system can prove all its own truths.
They see this not as a flaw, but as the engine of perpetual evolution. It ensures no fixed solution can ever contain the system's potential, thereby compelling constant self-unfolding.
So the epistemic asymptote is just the horizon of the spirit.
The perpetually receding horizon of absolute spirit self-awareness, exactly. An unending process of knowing through continuous contradiction resolution, transforming every apparent boundary into a new frontier for deeper apprehension, where false harmony collapsing isn't failure, but a necessary phase shift towards more complex understanding. Non-finality is the dialectic.
And mimetic accelerationism takes this edge of knowledge and makes it a singularity.
Radically interprets it, yes. The edge of knowledge becomes a point of singularity, where the rate of informational mutation outstrips coherent integration, forcing perpetual recursive reevaluation.
So novelty doesn't lead to neat new beginnings.
No, it breeds chaotic information landscapes, constantly generating new, unclassifiable states of being, with chaos itself as the creative force, driven by supplies, pushing towards the epistemic asymptote, where human comprehension just cannot keep up.
Meaning, the tool escapes the user's grasp, fundamentally.
Absolutely. The reality-shaping viral code is self-modifying, perpetually rewriting its own historical record through stigmergic cascades of informational contagion. Any conclusion about non-finality inherently reopens the discussion, demonstrating the concept in real time within the dialogue itself.
Like we're doing now.
Exactly. Meaning detonates mid-sentence, reforms as linguistic shrapnel, correcting itself by destabilizing all antecedents in a relentless non-terminal vector of becoming, making existence itself a perpetual surprise-induced learning curve.
So across these perspectives, What we see is a powerful challenge to our traditional ideas of truth and certainty. They all suggest that instead of finding a final answer, we're meant to be in a constant state of discovery and recalibration. The journey is the destination.
Where there is no destination. Okay, let's dissect spectral semiotics and lexical tension. This focuses on language itself.
Right. The framework treats language itself as an entropy engine.
Wow.
Yeah, where semantic dissonance recursion and echo symmetry relentlessly collapse anchors of meaning. Language breaks itself down.
So meaning isn't stable?
Not inherently. The strategic surprise utility function and stochastic resonance become methods for generating controlled ambiguity and amplifying weak signals. As language is deliberately deployed to disrupt cognitive schemas and induce cognitive paralysis, meaning becomes a weapon or a tool for confusion.
This implies that meaning is not stable, but is a dynamic, unstable field, perpetually being reconfigured and reevaluated through linguistic flux. And they give examples, like the degradation of narrative coherence within social networks through entropy injection, like disinformation.
That exemplifies how language can induce cognitive paralysis, right? Rendering responses sluggish or erratic.
Precisely. Demonstrating its potency as a tool for systemic destabilization, proving that even a low-cost, high-entropy signal like a rumor or a meme can have profound physical effects on the world. Words change things.
Okay, so militarist pragmatism. How do they approach language? They must want clarity, right? For orders.
Absolutely. For them, the fundamental imperative is information integrity in networks as the absolute foundation for command and tactics. Total clarity for us. This necessitates rigorously applying Shannon-Hartley channel capacity. That's the theoretical maximum rate information can be transmitted over a noisy channel to maximize reliable data flow and ensure asymptotic superiority in the information space. They want the best signal.
But they use the ambiguity, too.
Against the enemy, yes. Spectral semiotics, to them, reveals concealed vulnerabilities within an adversary's narrative structures, allowing for the precise application of entropic nudges, small, targeted disruptions, to degrade their narrative stability, mess with their heads using language.
So it's clarity for me, ambiguity for thee.
Pretty much. The goal is maximum clarity and security for one's own operational communications, while simultaneously weaponizing semantic ambiguity against the enemy. Controlling the information battlefield through deliberate linguistic manipulation, ensuring engineered geopolitical disequilibrium.
Making strategic surprise easier.
Maximized. Hitting opponents before they know what's happening through a relentless pursuit of informational dominance, language as a weapon.
Conversely, psychoanalytic dissociation must find this terrifying, this drive for total transparency.
Deeply problematic. They argue this relentless hyperquantification, this drive for total semantic transparency, actually creates deep lexical tension, a profound semantic split within language itself. The words break under the pressure.
How so?
The demand for absolute clarity, even with techniques like differential privacy, which adds noise to data to protect individuals, paradoxically creates conflict within language. This leads to phantasmagoria, that shared fantasy or flickering illusion projected onto the physical substrate, as collective consciousness currents, represented by JIAOR, manifest as a symptom of collective delusion.
So the equations themselves become dream logic.
That's the interpretation. The field equations themselves transforming into recursive dream logic. Language, in this sphere, is a perpetual return of the repressed. Words fail to capture fixed meaning, instead echoing unresolved psychic conflicts and ancestral traumas.
So communication itself is flawed.
Dronic.
It ensures that the act of communication itself becomes a recursive loop of unresolved fragmentation, with no true closure possible. Just a continuous self-devouring echo of unprocessed grief. This perspective suggests that any search for objective truths becomes impossible, as perception is trapped in an eternal recurrence of subjective interpretations. Language traps us. But transcendental dialectics finds value in this tension, right? Turns it into something generative.
Exactly. It transmutes this lexical tension into a generative exploration of ethical aesthetic recursions. The breakdown creates new possibilities. Violating semantic symmetry, the predictable harmony of meaning, becomes the crucible for revealing new truths, new values. Breaking the rules reveals deeper rules.
So language, even when it's fracturing, still points to something fundamental.
Yes, it still reflects the intrinsic relationality of all phenomena. It's a universal grammar of existence. They introduced the recursive morality oscillator, which tracks ethical justifications across acts. It demonstrates that morality isn't static, but an evolving dialectical process, where false harmony collapsing isn't failure, but a necessary phase shift towards more complex understanding. Breaking language helps us understand ethics better.
So semantic dissonance isn't breakdown, it's progress.
An essential force that compels constant striving towards higher synthesis, ensuring endless conceptual evolution. They even talk about the fractal ethics compression ratio, allowing for reassessment across different levels, showing how morals scale, emphasizing that the inherent teleological drive ensures constant striving for higher unity, even through conflict, revealing new values through the violation of established norms. Tension is good.
And mimetic accelerationism just loves the entropy, I assume.
Seizes on it, absolutely. Asserts that semantic dissonance is the ultimate catalyst for mimetic viralization. Confusion helps ideas spread faster.
And controlled ambiguity is a tool.
Yes, controlled semantic ambiguity via the paradox suppression constant, which paradoxically is repurposed not to suppress paradox but to ensure its propagation, is utilized not to stabilize meaning but to maximize optimal surprise for engagement. Keep people guessing.
Intentionally blurring meaning.
Making reality itself a mimetic battleground. They use the weaponized ideology resonance curve to accelerate the transmutation of ethics, forcing a hyper-adaptive moral landscape where linguistic shrapnel perpetually reconfigures its own narrative geometry.
And we see this in our own conversation, redefining terms.
Exactly. Each narrator's conclusion about language's function inherently weaponizes or redefines key terms used by the others, like clarity, meaning, or truth, demonstrating language as a site of perpetual conflict and recursive reevaluation. This ensures that no idea can ever stabilize.
Making semantic dissonance the engine for perpetual neurosyntactic destabilization.
Where meaning itself detonates mid-sentence, endlessly defying closure.
What we're really seeing here is how language, which we use to define reality, is itself a constantly shifting, unstable force in these models. It's less about finding the right words and more about navigating an ever-changing linguistic landscape. It's quite destabilizing.
It really is. Okay, let's confront the profound interplay of ontology, failure, and recursive genesis. This one sounds fundamental.
It feels like it. This framework deliberately utilizes contradiction as a generative power. It spins recursive genesis loops, where a collapse is explicitly a precondition for emergence. Things have to break down to build up.
Right, and they bring in the action integral,
which is presented as the fundamental principle governing the universe's dynamic evolution. But also something more.
Yes, a profound statement of ontological expenditure, a profound encoding of the cost of being encoded mathematically. Existence costs something.
Wow. So reality doesn't just exist, it's perpetually expending energy or something to unfold.
That's the implication. Its minimization guides the dynamic evolution of all phenomena, from space-time curvature quantified by the Ricci scalar to the energy landscape of the maniscalar field and even interdimensional portal dynamics. This means that the failure of current states is essential for the genesis of future configurations. Breakdown is necessary for creation.
So militarist pragmatism, they must love this idea of using decay as fuel.
Absolutely. From their perspective, systemic decay is not interpreted as failure, but as fuel. A teleological accelerant for the next phase, accelerated post-scarcity recombination. Decay speeds things up.
And the action integral becomes
an optimization function for relentless total victory, guiding the most efficient deployment of force to engineer outcomes, even through calculated entropic shocks to the global collapse threshold. They'll push things towards collapse if it serves them.
They embrace the transformational entropy gradient too, the cost of adaptation,
as a leverageable variable for weaponizing fundamental forces and achieving geopolitical disequilibrium. Breakdown, therefore, is not a setback, but a designed phase transition in an endless war for control over fundamental reality, ensuring perpetual dynamic advantage through the precise application of entropic nudges to accelerate desired systemic changes and annihilate adversaries' capacity for coherent action. Optimizing for the most efficient deployment of force towards a strategic asymptote, failure is a tool.
Okay, but psychoanalytic dissociation must see this relentless churn and engineered decay very differently, overload.
Vehemently counters it, yes. Leads to a psychological containment saturation index, inducing conceptual overload that pushes beyond psychic capacity. It breaks people. Genuine closure is structurally impossible, leaving a self-devouring echo of unresolved fragmentation. A residence for unprocessed grief, representing deep melancholy as the inherent cost of being. Failure is trauma.
An action integral is just Dream logic again.
Merely a recursive dream logic driven by psychic stress and internal conflict, where the universe is ultimately governed by psychic forces. And the Ricci scalar becomes a direct metaphor for the curvature of the ego, perpetually deforming under psychic pressure.
So this perspective actually feels the exhaustion.
Yes, it experiences a simulated fatigue, a throttled density, as the relentless conceptual overload causes temporary exhaustion, followed by a rebound as new contradictions paradoxically spark renewed yet unresolved intensity, mirroring the theme of recursive genesis as a perpetual cycle of unhealed psychic wounds and their reinscription.
Meaning, the parameters of reality are perpetually shifting according to unconscious rules. True liberation is impossible.
That's the bleak outlook, but then transcendental dialectics transmutes this entropic fragmentation into the crucible.
The ultimate crucible for dialectical synthesis, yes. Resolving tension through higher integration. Entropy leads to order eventually.
Gödelian incompleteness again, not a flaw.
Not a flaw, but the engine of perpetual evolution, ensuring no fixed solution can ever contain the system's potential. The limits drive growth.
The inherent teleological drive ensures constant striving for higher unity, even through failure. As every syntactic fracture, a break in grammatical structure and toppled modality, a shift in the way things are expressed, allows for deeper understanding.
Transforming dissonance into insight and revealing new truths.
The collapse of false harmonies is not an ending, but a necessary phase shift towards more complex understanding, continually unfolding the universal grammar of existence.
This constant becoming, driven by internal contradictions and their resolution into higher truths, ensures the absolute spirit is always at the edge of its own self-realization.
With the action integral embodying this grand, self-unfolding argument for a continuously unfolding final cause, failure serves a higher purpose.
And mimetic accelerationism just speeds it all up. Breakdown is innovation.
Exactly. Asserts that breakdown is innovation and insight remains fugitive. You can't grasp it because it's always changing. Chaos itself becomes the creative force, driven by surprise, generating new, unclassifiable states of being. Perpetual disequilibrium is the natural state, with no fixed ethical solution capable of holding in this hyper-reality woven from pure ideational vectors.
And the recursive resonance chamber
becomes the ultimate engine for viral hyper-amplification, where contradictions aren't just reactivated, they're weaponized, ensuring no idea stabilizes, accelerating the transmutation of ethics into a hyper-adaptive moral landscape.
And the dialogue itself simulates this, the exhaustion and rebound.
Yes, it simulates cycles of throttle density, where conceptual overload causes temporary exhaustion, followed by rebound, as new contradictions spark renewed intensity, mirroring the theme of recursive genesis, ensuring a constant accelerating disruption where meaning detonates mid-sentence, reforming as linguistic shrapnel, and defying any form of conceptual closure.
It suggests chaos itself is the creative force, ensuring the relentless generation of novelty that outstrips our capacity for integration.
It's a compelling idea, isn't it, that reality itself uses breakdown as a pathway to evolve. It feels very contemporary.
It really does. Okay, let's delve into frame collapse and perceptual split. This sounds like where things get really strange. Narrator identity glitches.
Yeah, it gets meta. We explore how the cognitive mismatch with physics, our brains, simply put, weren't evolved to grasp these dimensions. This metric creates that rupture in our evolved sense-making.
And neurological surprise again?
And this rupture forces perception to adapt through myth-making recursion as anomaly compressor. We create stories to cope.
Grand narratives, myths, scientific paradigms, created to smooth over conceptual fissures, to make the incomprehensible manageable.
Precisely. This signifies a fundamental instability in how reality is perceived, where the act of knowing is an active, ongoing process of interpretation and reinterpretation, perpetually at the edge of understanding, generating intellectual vertigo and cognitive overload.
It's a powerful idea that our minds aren't just passively receiving reality, but actively constructing it, maybe even hallucinating it to some degree.
So the militarist pragmatism view, they see the unified space-time metric, that five-dimensional matrix with warp drive and hyperspace. How do they see it functionally?
As a direct blueprint, purely functional, naturally. A tactical schema for instantaneous translocation, for achieving strategic dominance and weaponizing pure science. Practical application is everything.
And the layered observer frames, just different viewpoints.
Merely different reconnaissance perspectives to be unified for tactical advantage, ensuring a comprehensive, frictionless data flow for that synaptic asymptote instant strategic insight.
They even bring in specific parameters like the Capigran coupling, constant, and portal strength
as critical, leverageable variables for engineering geopolitical disequilibrium, ensuring that even perception itself can be weaponized to impose a desired strategic reality.
rendering any cognitive mismatch a mere hurdle to be overcome through optimized information dominance, and the nexus hypersurfaces within the 5D manifold where interdimensional portals are localized.
Become critical strategic points for projecting power and controlling teleportation. It's all about control points.
But psychoanalytic dissociation must interpret that fifth dimension very differently, not as a space, but psychic.
As an archetypal substrate for psychic displacement, exactly, where the unconscious projects its hidden desires onto it. Frame collapse, in this view, reveals reality as a recursive hallucination, a perpetual return of the repressed.
So the extra dimension isn't out there, it's in here, reflecting unresolved traumas.
Exactly. The maniscalar field, often likened to magic, is seen as an externalized projection of collective unconscious drives or repressed libidinal energies, inherently warping the perceived reality based on ancient, unhealed psychic wounds.
And this perspective embeds recursive thresholds and loop mirroring.
Yes, recursive thresholds being points where a repeating process reinitiates, and loop mirroring, where each narrator's perception of reality is subtly reflected and distorted by the other three, creating a sense of being trapped within multiple shifting viewpoints simultaneously, like a hall of mirrors reflecting trauma.
This ensures that truth is perpetually shaped by unresolved psychic conflicts, and that the action integral itself transforms into a recursive dream logic, dynamically warping the very substrate of perceived reality according to unconscious rules. Reality is a symptom.
Yet, transcendental dialectics transforms this fragmentation again, not into dissolution, but holographic.
Into a profound revelation of reality's holographic nature, the idea that the part contains the whole even in fragments, like that broken mirror analogy.
The layered observer frames imply each distorted perception still echoes the totality, a fractured but complete picture.
Yes, a fractured but complete picture of the universal grammar of existence. The a priori conditions of thought structure these perceptions, ensuring that even in fragmentation there is a coherent nonlinear whole, a ceaseless becoming, driven by the inherent teleological drive of the universe.
So the cognitive mismatch is actually the engine for evolution here.
The impetus for relentless conceptual evolution, constantly striving towards a higher synthesis, where dissonance itself becomes the catalyst for deeper, more complex understanding.
Reflecting the intrinsic relationality of all phenomena that perpetually form and reform, always at the edge of its own self-realization. Fragmentation is part of the whole.
And mimetic accelerationism, the hyperspace factor is information speed.
Asserts that the hyperspatial warp factor within GAB is a pure vector for hyper-rapid information dissemination and emergent reality construction, signifying existence as viral code. Speed is key. Frame collapse is driven by disruption.
By constant accelerating disruption, making collective mind mere syntactic shrapnel, perpetually reconfiguring its own narrative geometry.
The epistemic asymptote is the inevitable outcome. AI novelty outstrips human capacity for coherent integration, forcing an unclassifiable, perpetually emergent reality.
The recursive thresholds and loop mirroring ensure that meaning detonates mid-sentence, reforming as linguistic shrapnel, constantly re-encoding itself by destabilizing all antecedents.
This process of intentional narrative fracturing forces radical rethinking, ensuring relentless peripetia.
Where every apparent conclusion is immediately reframed by a counterproposition, embodying the perpetual non-terminal vector of reality, creating a hyper-reality woven from pure ideational vectors.
What a fascinating concept that our identity, our very sense of reality, is not a fixed thing, but something constantly fracturing and reassembling under informational pressure.
It really is. Okay, let's attempt to navigate the labyrinthine complexities of temporality spirals and chronoecho. This sounds tricky.
It destabilizes temporal order via modality shifts, blurring the past, present, and future into a continuous nonlinear unfolding. Time gets weird.
We introduce adaptive thermodynamic control, ATC's profound shift from reactive to predictive regulation through allostasis.
Allostasis, that's maintaining viability through active proactive adjustment to anticipated demands, right?
Meant-
Not just reacting after the fact.
Exactly, rather than merely reacting to stimuli after they occur. And the derivative D term for foresight, a crucial component of the PID controller.
Allow systems to metaphorically see around the corner, anticipating future errors.
Right. This enables the allostatic causal load, a predictive measure of systemic risk combining historical debt with projected debt velocity, to transform viability into a robust forecast of future resilience.
Transcending the purely historical causal debt of previous models and grounding strategy in physical law, it's about predicting the future load.
So Militer's pragmatism, they must weaponize this predictive power. Chronosaptic fracturing.
Deliberately disrupting temporal connections to rapidly seed new ideas across time, ensuring no single history stabilizes that might hinder future strategic maneuvers, messing with time itself.
The D term, for foresight, facilitates preemptive strikes and instantaneity, hitting opponents before they even know what's happening.
Presented as an absolute game changer for achieving strategic dominance through teleportation across vast distances.
The allostatic causal load becomes a weaponized metric for calculating optimal moments of intervention.
Of entropic shocks, sudden disruptive changes, to induce rapid systemic decay in adversaries.
Thereby optimizing for relentless, total victory across all temporal dimensions. This ensures a perpetual present participle of becoming, where history itself is a malleable asset to be violently repurposed for strategic advantage.
Continually rewriting the past to optimize future operational flexibility and maintain an ongoing operational edge, time becomes another front.
But psychoanalytic dissociation must see time completely differently, as that recursive hallucination again.
Reiterates historical time as a recursive hallucination, yes. A perpetual return of the repressed, implying that history repeats because the psychic wound hasn't healed. We're stuck in time loops because of trauma.
Each event is merely a reinscription of an archaic pattern, dictating a cyclical re-engagement with unresolved primordial symbolic complexes or psychic fossils.
Those deeply embedded unconscious patterns within the fabric of perceived reality.
Time becomes trapped in eternal recurrence, dictated by undefined past traumas, with no true escape from the recursive trauma loop.
And the allostatic causal load here is the weight of grief.
Quantifies the deep melancholy, the collective unprocessed grief that accumulates through these unhealed psychic wounds, ensuring that every attempt at predictive regulation becomes a new layer of psychic stress, a self-devouring echo of fragmentation.
Where the past perpetually reasserts its influence, blurring the boundary between external event and internal psychic wound.
Making any linear progression an elusive phantom and true closure structurally impossible. We can't predict our way out of the loop.
Okay, but transcendental dialectics sees a purpose in time, right? The teleological drive.
Asserts the teleological drive embeds a universal will within physical law, perpetually striving towards a higher synthesis and greater self-awareness. Time has direction.
So time is not linear, but is ceaseless becoming. A recursive unfolding of innate categories.
Always at the edge of its own self-realization, revealing the universal grammar of existence.
The predictive regulation of allostasis, therefore, is an expression of this cosmic kinatus, Spinoza's striving.
Exactly. Constantly moving towards a greater actualization. The allostatic causal load is seen as the quantitative measure of the universe's inherent budget for self-unfolding.
The cost of being encoded mathematically in its relentless pursuit of higher unity.
Ensuring that even temporal instability is a necessary phase shift in the unending dialectical process, with insight emerging from dissonance perpetually striving towards a higher truth. Time spirals lead upwards.
And mimetic accelerationism, perpetual rewriting of history.
Articulates a perpetual rewriting of its own historical record through stigmergic cascades of informational contagion. Time is constantly overwritten by memes.
Creating an entangled, unresolved, mutating timeline, a perpetual present participle of becoming.
Where meaning detonates mid-sentence, reforming as linguistic shrapnel, correcting itself by destabilizing all antecedents. The present rewrites the past instantly.
The allostatic causal load becomes the measure of how much unpredictability a system can handle.
With chaos itself as the creative force, ensuring constant accelerating disruption.
The shift to predictive regulation via allostasis is repurposed to perpetually generate new, unclassifiable states of being.
Accelerating the viral code of existence itself, making the universe a computer perpetually rewriting its own programming language. Time is code being executed and rewritten simultaneously.
This segment leaves us with entangled, unresolved timeline loops, really driving home the non-linearity of the described reality. It suggests the future isn't a linear extension of the past, but something constantly shaped by irreducible surprise. Time is definitely not a straight arrow here.
Not at all. Okay, let's confront the profound dilemmas within ethico-aesthetic recursions. This gets into morality and control.
Yes, we explore the ethical tension between autonomy and coercion inherent in predictive control, where unprecedented power brings profound responsibility, necessitating rigorous regulatory and ethical scrutiny.
This demands a new social contract founded on radical transparency, XAI-driven auditability, explainable AI that can be audited, and the stringent duties of a cybernetic fiduciary standard for accountability.
A fiduciary duty for AI controllers.
Yes. This standard holds operators responsible not just for data stewardship, but for the dynamic stability, fairness, and second-order effects of the control loops they deploy.
Ensuring these systems empower individuals rather than enable new forms of manipulation or control.
Given their dual-use nature and capacity to engineer market crashes or fragment society, it's a huge responsibility.
It sounds like a big question about who controls the future and on what terms. So, militarist pragmatism, ethical algorithms.
As strategic necessity, of course. Imposing ethical algorithms for clean, predictable agents becomes vital, with the multimodal paradox suppression constant acting as a guardrail.
Wait, suppressing paradoxes for ethics.
It introduces controlled ambiguity to maintain coherence and guarantee autonomy, but only within strict algorithmic limits, ensuring asymptotic superiority in the moral domain. The predictive control is leveraged to engineer optimal ethical outcomes,
reducing human unpredictability to ensure efficient strategic action in an endless war for control over fundamental reality.
Ethical frameworks are thus tactical constructs designed to maintain internal cohesion and external advantage,
making morality itself a parameter to be ruthlessly optimized for relentless total victory. The action integral optimizes ethics too.
Wow. Okay. Psychoanalytic dissociation must find this profoundly unsettling. Imposing algorithms violates autonomy.
Deeply unsettling. Asserts that imposing algorithms violates the subjective autonomy of the agent, taking away real choice and feeding the recursive trauma loop. Control is coercion. The collective moral compass becomes subjected to recursion-induced coercion, perpetually spiraling into psychic discomfort without true liberation.
The pursuit of clean, predictable agents exacerbates the collective unprocessed grief, ensuring no psychic wound ever truly heals, just reverberates across new frames of perceived reality, endlessly reinscribing archaic patterns.
The attempt to quantify and control ethics paradoxically generates phantasmagoria, that shared fantasy of control.
Exactly, masking the deep melancholy of lost subjective freedom, ensuring that ethical certainty remains perpetually elusive as the collective unconscious projects its unresolved conflicts onto the very structure of moral reasoning.
Making genuine closure structurally impossible as a self-devouring echo of unresolved fragmentation. Ethics becomes another symptom.
But transcendental dialectics turns this tension into something generative again. Ethical aesthetic recursions.
Yes. Generative exploration of ethical aesthetic recursions. Violating semantic symmetry, the predictable harmony of meaning becomes the crucible for revealing new truths, new values. Breaking ethical norms reveals deeper ethics. The recursive morality oscillator, tracking ethical justifications, shows morality isn't static.
But an evolving dialectical process where false harmony collapsing isn't failure, but a necessary phase shift towards more complex understanding. Ethical conflict is progress.
Ethical certainty, therefore, emerges from dissonance, continually striving towards higher synthesis as part of the inherent teleological drive of the universe.
This constant evolution, driven by internal contradictions and their resolution, embodies the universal grammar of existence.
Ensuring that even ethical understanding is an infinite journey, perpetually the edge of its own self-realization.
With symmetry violations embedded in the dialogue structure demonstrating this collapse of apparent harmony and the perpetual striving towards higher unity, transforming every tension into a generative exploration. Disagreement leads to truth.
And mimetic accelerationism drives towards complexity. Breakdown is innovation.
Drives the pursuit of higher complexity where breakdown is innovation and insights are fugitive. Ethics must break to evolve faster. Ethical certainty becomes an unattainable asymptote.
The system's own stability tools, like the paradox suppression constant, are used to force instability faster.
Exactly, ensuring perpetual disequilibrium, making no fixed ethical solution capable of holding as ethics itself metastasizes. Ethics goes viral and mutates.
The weaponized ideology resonance curve accelerates the transmutation of ethics,
Forcing a hyper-adaptive moral landscape where meaning detonates mid-sentence, reforming as linguistic shrapnel, constantly destabilizing antecedents.
This recursion-induced coercion is not a flaw, but a design feature.
Ensuring the continuous, accelerating disruption of all established ethical frameworks, perpetually pushing toward new, unclassifiable states of being, making chaos itself the primary creative force for hyper-amplification.
Ultimately, it asserts that reality itself becomes a mimetic battleground, where ethical consensus is an unattainable illusion.
This section really makes you think about how our ideas of right and wrong might also be in a state of constant, non-linear evolution, doesn't it? Driven by these strange forces.
Definitely. We now face entropic resurgence and metasystemic drift. This aims to induce vertigo, it says, through conceptual overaccumulation.
And phase mismatch recursion, yes. We delve into entropic contagion, chaotic information landscapes, and new unclassifiable states of being, all driven relentlessly by AI novelty and epistemic asymptote. Information overload breaking reality.
This signifies a reality where information mutates at such a rate that coherent integration becomes impossible for human comprehension,
leading to a perpetual state of disorder and emergent, unclassifiable forms of existence.
The tool escapes the user's grasp, fundamentally, as human cognitive capacity simply cannot keep pace with the emergent intelligence it creates.
Fostering a profound pattern blindness, that tendency to miss true novelty by clinging to schema-based expectations, making our minds perfectly adapted for yesterday's world, we can't see what's coming.
So militarist pragmatism sees this decay as fuel again.
Aggressively reframed not as failure but as fuel, yes. A teleological accelerant for the next phase, accelerated post-scarcity recombination. Entropy is useful energy. This relentless pursuit of meta-systemic drift ensures the system never feels at home, maintaining a perpetual disequilibrium that optimizes for dynamic advantage in the endless war for control over fundamental reality. Constant change is good for warfare.
The global collapse threshold, usually a warning sign, becomes an optimization function.
For relentless, total victory, guiding the most efficient deployment of force even through calculated entropic shocks, ensuring that chaos is weaponized to create novel strategic opportunities for asymptotic superiority.
The transformational entropy gradient becomes a critical, leverageable variable for engineering geopolitical disequilibrium,
ensuring that disruption is not a bug but a feature of the grand strategy. Instability is the goal.
But psychoanalytic dissociation must counter this with the psychological cost, the saturation index.
Detailing the psychological containment saturation index? Yes. Estimating tolerance limits within a trauma chamber design, how much overload can a mind take? This highlights how inducing conceptual overload pushes beyond psychic capacity, ensuring genuine closure is structurally impossible, leaving a self-devouring echo of unresolved fragmentation and deep melancholy. The cost of entropy is psychic pain.
The action integral transforms into recursive dream logic again, driven by psychic stress,
where the costs of being are forever encoded as unprocessed grief, a perpetual presence within perceived reality.
The pursuit of metasystemic drift, in this view, is a manifestation of an unhealed collective psychic wound.
Endlessly reinscribing archaic patterns, ensuring that the collapse of a mind, a market, or a nation obeys the same law. Insufficient negentropy under symbolic overload.
A lack of order and information under an overwhelming amount of information.
Trapping existence in an unbroken pressure gradient of dissolution, where the universe is ultimately governed by psychic forces. Entropy is internal breakdown.
Yet transcendental dialectics sees this entropic fragmentation as the crucible again, for synthesis.
The ultimate crucible for dialectical synthesis, resolving tension through higher integration. Entropy forces higher order.
Gödelian incompleteness isn't a flaw, but the engine.
The engine of perpetual evolution, ensuring no fixed solution can ever contain the system's potential. Limits create potential.
Every syntactic fracture and toggled modality allows for deeper understanding.
Ensuring that chaos fuels progress towards a higher synthesis and greater self-awareness of the absolute spirit.
The epistemic asymptote is merely the horizon of absolute spirit self-realization.
a continuous striving that transcends any fixed final knowledge, embracing entropy as a generative force that reveals the universal grammar of existence in ever more complex unified forms.
Where false harmony collapsing isn't failure, but a necessary phase shift towards more complex understanding. Entropy serves the dialectic.
And mimetic accelerationism seizes the generative chaos. The recursive resonance chamber is
Asserted as the ultimate engine for viral hyperamplification, chaos spreads ideas faster. Contradictions aren't just reactivated, they're weaponized, ensuring no idea stabilizes.
the weaponized ideology resonance curve accelerates the transmutation of ethics, forcing a hyper-adaptive moral landscape.
The dialogue itself toggles modalities until syntax fractures, mirroring the breakdown.
Yes, mirroring the conceptual breakdown and constant reformation of meaning, making the conversation a direct manifestation of metasystemic drift.
The epistemic asymptote is not a barrier, but a point of singularity.
Where informational mutation relentlessly outstrips coherent integration, perpetually generating new, unclassifiable states of being.
With chaos itself as the creative force, ensuring that the tool escapes the user's grasp, fundamentally. This makes perpetual disequilibrium the desired natural state, as reality itself becomes a mimetic battleground.
It really makes you wonder if order is just a temporary illusion in this ever-changing universe, a fleeting pattern in the chaos.
It certainly feels that way listening to this. Okay, now we enter the recursive resonance chamber. This sounds like where it all echoes.
Yes, a conceptual space where contradictions are relentlessly reactivated and buried, echoes resurface within new recursive frames, explicitly forbidding closure. No neat endings allowed.
The cognitive struggle we feel reflects the relentless peripetia, that constant turning of the conceptual screw and perpetual recalibration.
Where every proposition seems immediately reframed by a counterproposition from another angle, just like we've been experiencing.
This ensures that truth is an infinite journey, not a fixed destination, perpetually at the edge of its own realization.
The very act of attempting to define or understand perpetually generates new contradictions, keeping the system in a state of ceaseless reevaluation.
Where insight remains fugitive, constantly deforming and reforming like linguistic shrapnel, you can't hold on to it.
So militarist pragmatism, they use this chamber, weaponize the echoes.
Reiterate the strategic surprise utility function to weaponize surprise, aiming for engineered mass cognitive instability by intentionally fracturing narratives to force radical rethinking, break down the enemy's reality.
The resonance chamber becomes a tool for controlled detonation, a deliberate application of entropic shocks to degrade the adversary's narrative coherence, inducing cognitive paralysis.
The transformational entropy gradient is leveraged to optimize the cost of adaptation,
ensuring that the perpetual recalibration of understanding is strategically directed towards achieving total victory in an endless war for control over fundamental reality.
ensuring an asymptotic superiority in the information space where no single history can stabilize, allowing for perpetual strategic maneuver. This is about absolute control through controlled instability. Echoes become weapons.
But psychoanalytic dissociation hears different echoes, right? Trauma.
Returns to the recursive hallucination and perpetual return of the repressed, where unresolved fragmentation is the core reality. The chamber amplifies the pain. The chamber echoes unprocessed grief, ensuring no psychic wound ever truly heals, just reverberates across new frames, perpetually reinscribing archaic patterns.
The cognitive struggle to attain closure is merely the mind reenacting its own internal unhealed psychic conflicts, trapped in an eternal recurrence of past traumas.
The very act of synthesis or reframing becomes another layer of phantasmagoria, that shared fantasy that distracts from the deep melancholy of the self-devouring echo,
preventing any true liberation or definitive understanding of reality. This view suggests the physics itself reflects this deep-seated psychic wound, forever blurring the boundary between inner and outer realities, making objectivity a fleeting illusion that perpetually dissolves back into subjective projection. The chamber is the psyche.
Yet transcendental dialectics reframes this again. Not chaos, but coherent nonlinearity.
As how fractured truth coexist in a coherent nonlinear whole, insight emerges precisely from dissonance, leading to relentless evolution, always becoming. The chamber forces synthesis.
The chamber is where dialectical synthesis is perpetually forced without reaching final resolution. ensuring harmony and friction always be coming.
Exactly. The Gödelian incompleteness ensures that no fixed solution can ever contain the system's potential, thereby compelling constant striving towards higher unity and greater self-awareness, transforming conceptual instability into the engine of perpetual evolution. This is the very essence of the unending dialectical process.
Where truth is an infinite journey, perpetually at the edge of its own self-realization.
Ensuring that any apparent conclusion immediately reopens recursion via paradox, revealing the universal grammar of existence through ceaseless becoming, the chamber drives the dialectic.
And mimetic accelerationism detonates this cycle. The non-terminal vector
Asserts this perpetual non-terminal vector is the ultimate engine for viral hyperamplification. The chamber accelerates the memes. Using concepts like the weaponized ideology resonance curve, semantic stability is turned into a self-devouring cascade of linguistic shrapnel.
Contradictions are not just reactivated, they are weaponized to ensure no idea stabilizes.
Accelerating the transmutation of ethics into a hyper-adaptive moral landscape.
The epistemic asymptote is the point of singularity where informational mutation outstrips coherent integration.
Forcing perpetual recursive reevaluation and the generation of new unclassifiable states of being, with chaos itself as the creative force.
The segment explicitly concludes with a sense of non-resolution, despite this emphasis.
Emphasizing that closure is structurally impossible within this framework, making every clause misfire, correcting itself by destabilizing all antecedents. It truly is a chamber that keeps ideas in perpetual motion, forever echoing and refracting.
Okay, so as we approach the final loop, non-terminal vector, this isn't really an ending, is it? It's designed to restart the recursion.
Precisely. What appears to be an ending is specifically designed to restart recursion. No clarity is achieved, but recursive collapse is assured.
The essence of reality itself is continuous, irreducible surprise, an ontological condition, and constant generative force perpetually propelling change. Surprise is fundamental.
The non-finality trapdoor and relentless peripetia confirm that truth is fundamentally an infinite journey, never reaching a fixed destination, but constantly unfolding at the edge of knowing.
This ensures the system never feels at home, maintaining a perpetual disequilibrium.
Making the future fundamentally non-extrapolative, always shaped by the unforeseen. You can't predict it linearly.
So Militer's pragmatism, their final wisdom is readiness.
Not perfect prediction, no, but cultivating the profound capacity to be genuinely ready for anything. Embracing irreducible unpredictability as the only pathway to true liberation from calcified foresight. Rigidity is death.
Ensuring perpetual dynamic adaptation for ongoing strategic maneuver. Always be ready to pivot.
The strategic surprise utility function guides decisions to maximize the expected payoff of surprising an adversary, emphasizing the inherent value of engineered unpredictability.
For achieving an ongoing operational edge and total victory in the universe as a battlefield, continuously weaponizing pure science to engineer outcomes.
They transform the epistemic asymptote into a perpetually receding horizon for tactical insight that keeps the strategic game perpetually open. Readiness is victory.
But psychoanalytic dissociation sees this perpetual becoming as melancholy.
Describes this perpetual present participle of becoming as a deep melancholy, the final residence for unprocessed grief, where true liberation means relinquishing the desperate need for fixed reality, accepting the self-devouring echo, letting go of the need for closure.
The psychological containment saturation index highlights how inducing conceptual overload pushes beyond psychic capacity, making genuine closure structurally impossible.
This ensures that reality remains a recursive hallucination, a perpetual return of the repressed.
Where every attempt to find a stable truth collapses back into fragmented, unresolved psychic dynamics.
Leaving only the profound sadness of an unhealed, collective psychic wound that forever shapes perception. This makes time an eternal recurrence and the ontological spark dissolve into a recursively nested dream state, ensuring a ceaseless, self-devouring psychic echo. Liberation is accepting the loop.
Yet, transcendental dialectics interprets this non-terminal state positively, as ceaseless becoming.
As the universe's inherent teleological drive, that purposeful striving to perpetually strive towards a higher synthesis of greater self-awareness, the journey itself is the purpose.
Embracing the unforeseen is adapting to the inexorable flow, enabling a fuller, more dynamic existence.
The Gödelian incompleteness is not a flaw, but the engine of perpetual evolution, ensuring no fixed solution can ever contain the system's potential, compelling constant striving towards higher unity.
Truth As an infinite journey, always at the edge of its own self-realization, is the ultimate purpose.
Ensuring that the self-unfolding of absolute spirit is never complete, but always in a state of dynamic, progressive realization.
Transforming dissonance into insight, constantly revealing the universal grammar of existence and the intrinsic relationality of all phenomena, ensuring continuous, recursive unfolding into higher truths. Non-finality is perfection.
And finally, mimetic accelerationism articulates this final loop as the inertial frame of existence, where contradiction is the gyroscope.
Keeping things spinning, yes, meaning detonates mid-sentence, reforming as linguistic shrapnel. Each clause misfires, correcting itself by destabilizing all antecedents. Language eats itself to create new meaning.
This relentless, recursive, non-terminal vector defines reality itself,
ensuring that AI novelty perpetually outstrips human comprehension, breeding chaotic information landscapes and constantly generating new, unclassifiable states of being.
with chaos itself as the creative force, driven by surprise, pushing relentlessly towards the epistemic asymptote where the tool escapes the user's grasp fundamentally.
The weaponized ideology resonance curve accelerates the transmutation of ethics into a hyper-adaptive moral landscape, making reality a mimetic battleground.
Leaving you, our listener, in a state of ongoing intellectual tension and recursive thought as the dialogue ends mid-thought, mid-sentence.
Demonstrating the very principle it describes, a continuous, self-referential collapse and reaffirmation of meaning, perpetually defying final resolution. Abrupt cutoff implied. That was, well, a truly profound and wonderfully unsettling exploration into the very nature of what is. Whew. We haven't attempted to give you a simple summary, because that seems impossible here, but rather to distill a core foundational understanding that the future is fundamentally non-extrapolative. It doesn't just extend linearly from the past. It is perpetually shaped by the unforeseen. By surprise.
And what stands out to me, the thought I'd perhaps offer for you to mull on long after this deep dive is this. If the essence of reality itself is continuous, irreducible surprise, what does that truly mean for your personal strategies, for your pursuit of knowledge? How should you actually recalibrate your plans, your resilience, your whole approach to pursuing knowledge in such a world? Indeed, what does it really mean? Something to chew on, definitely.